What's up, geeks and gamers? It's Odin coming with an box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw the worst ever drop for an MCU title, Quantumania, dropping roughly 70%, which is a good 2 percentage points higher than the worst previous films. And it makes it one of the worst drops-offs, not only just in box office history, but especially specifically within MCU history. And this is spelling some pretty bad news for the film, because not only does this guarantee that the film will not make a whole lot of money back, there's actually a chance the film could end up losing money, especially if your break-even point for this film is $600 million. Mine is currently at $500 million, using the stats that I typically have been using for years, ever since I've been doing box office on this channel, and also, of course, on OMB Reviews, the channel that, the metrics I've been using has a break-even at $500 million. But even the likes of Deadline are having to admit that you're looking at over $500 million, just over $500 million in its final is what they are currently projecting this film to do. So let's just say not a very good sight, not very good sign overall, and likely going to be at least a very, very small profit return. You're looking at a tops of maybe 25 to 50 million in returns. And when you spend $200 million and only get 25 million as far as net profits are concerned, that is a terrible return on investment. You could still see this film end up actually losing money, again, depending on what metrics you are actually using. Let's go ahead and dive into the numbers. And yes, I do want to apologize. My voice is trash. Caught something from Baby Thor, and there's nothing that can be done about it. So we'll try and get through these numbers and try to show y'all what is going on. So Quantumania still was able to get to number one of the box office domestically, and this is something that I had projected was going to happen. If you follow my channel at all, many people were focusing on the massive Friday to Friday drop that this film saw. People often, though, forget that these numbers do not include the Thursday numbers, right? In the opening weekend, just like for Cocaine Bear and Jesus Revolution, that includes both Thursday and Friday in the opening day numbers. So Thursday and Friday are added together. And so that's why the drop looks so much worse in the Friday drop-off. But that's why you typically also see on Saturdays there is a kind of a rallying that happens, especially for bigger films, even if they're not very good, like Ant-Man and the Wasp. Quantumania is also just not a good film, and so you are seeing, right, that rally having taken place, but still not nearly enough, though, right? When I say rally, what I mean is you're looking at like 80% plus drop-off from Friday to Friday. Now for the weekend, you're looking at around a 70%, so that is quite better, but still not good at all. And yeah, let's just say this is spelling a lot of trouble for Walt Disney and the Walt Disney Company going forward, and for the MCU going forward. The issues that Warner Brothers has been seeing for a long time with not just their DCEU, but also with a lot of their other films. We're going to talk about a film that's losing money even today, right? We'll talk about a film that is going to have lost money. Talking about Magic Mike's Last Dance. You're looking at that potential happening with the MCU as well, because what this shows us is that everyone showed up opening weekend and very few showed up second weekend. So this shows you that the MCU stands are still out there, and they are still a decent force. They can get you to number one at the box office, but they are ultimately not as large of a number as they once were. And especially when you compare this to the previous Ant-Man films, and you compare the average ticket price of what it was in 2018 versus what it is now, even versus what it was in 2015 for the first Ant-Man film, you were looking at a lot less people going to see these movies. Yes, they're paying more, and so the numbers don't seem to indicate that there is a loss, but based off of not just the opening weekend, but also the second weekend drop, and the projection that even Deadline's putting forward of the film getting to just over $500 million, shows us very clearly that the $70 million that they've reinvested, again, they spent an extra $70 million on this versus the last film, and you're looking at them only getting 11 to 25 million in returns. That's a worse return on investment than they got for the previous two films. So even though they were trying to run with biggest opening in franchise history, was not enough. Cocaine Bear, though, doing very impressively here, $23 million. I've heard some mixed things about the film itself. Wouldn't surprise me at all. Seeing that the writer is not Elizabeth Banks is probably what made it interesting. The fact that Elizabeth Banks was directing it, I could see why that could definitely make the film not very good. But of course, I haven't seen it, so I cannot speak to that. I will let other people speak to it. I know there was a review on Geeks and Gamers. Go ahead and check that out if you want more information about the film itself. Jesus Revolution from Lionsgate coming at $15.5 million. Very impressive numbers there. Both of these films overperformed to a very large degree. Again, Cocaine Bear actually beat out Ant-Man on Friday. Again, that's why some people were saying, oh, could Cocaine Bear win out the weekend? And I was saying on my channel, there's just no way that's gonna happen because of the Saturday rebound that all these films tend to see, especially in their week two, right? The Fridays always look terrible, but when you see the Saturday and Sundays, it measures out, and you're still seeing bad numbers as far as drop-offs are concerned. but not nearly as bad as the 80%. Coming in number 4, still in the top 5, is Avatar: Way of Water. Though based off of these numbers, it's only at $665 million. And I say only because, as you all know, I've been tracking this versus Top Gun Maverick's domestic. Based off of the numbers that we're seeing, based off of the percentage drop-offs, and the fact that this film is not making $1 million a day, is making about $500,000 per day, if it's even getting that much, which is very, very low, even this far out for a film's legs, right? So it made a lot of money, no doubt about that, overseas and domestically too. But based on these numbers and based off of its weekday performance and the fact that Top Gun Maverick didn't start making less than $1 million until, sometime after this film did, I am now going to call and say Avatar: Way of Water is the champion worldwide, making over $2 billion. So again, kudos to them. But the domestic champion with over $718 million is going to go to Top Gun Maverick. So shout out to Tom Cruise, to Joseph Kosinski, the director, and to everyone involved in the make of Top Gun Maverick for making the highest grossing film domestically of 2022. And again, kudos to them. Avatar, you put up a good fight, and you did make more internationally, but domestically, Top Gun is king. Coming in the number 5 spot is lastly Puss in Boots. Still also another film just like Avatar that did much better than what was originally projected because of the weeks that it came out. This film and Avatar: Way of Water, both chart breakers. This film, though, is going to or has already been released on to streaming service, and so expect this film to not make that much more money on top of this. But again, we will talk about that when we look at the actual charting itself. Looking at some comparisons, though, for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania versus the other films, just to kind of give you an idea. Again, the first Tuesday, Ant-Man and the Wasp, when you adjust for inflation, was actually already beating out this film. And even though the film was able to catch up weekend-wise and beat out Ant-Man and the Wasp, when you look and see what's actually released right now, and also, again, you remember the fact that ticket prices are a lot higher today than they were back in 2018, 2015. Even when you adjust for inflation, it's not a perfect system. And so what you're going to see, though, is very quickly, especially with these kind of drops that we're seeing, very quickly you're going to see films like Ant-Man and the Wasp, and maybe even Ant-Man itself, be able to easily beat Quantumania. And this is the reason why I'm thinking this film is going to make somewhere between 500 and 550 million when all is said and done. When you look at these numbers here. So first off, remember when it was the biggest film of the franchise? Now guess what? Because of the projections being, hey, it's going to make over 500 million. We don't know exactly how much. For me, I'm thinking 5 to 550. That would put the film underneath that of the first Ant-Man. So yeah, you have the highest opening weekend, but that doesn't mean a whole lot when by the end of your run, you make less than the first Ant-Man. And when you remember that these are, again, not taking into account ticket prices, this means that so fewer people are going to see Quantumania than they were for Ant-Man and Ant-Man and the Wasp. Not a very good look for the film overall. The big thing, though, that I'm looking at, though, is the worldwide numbers, because though I think domestically you could see Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania be able to catch up to a film like Ant-Man and maybe even get to somewhere close to Ant-Man and the Wasp, though I have my doubts about that. You're not going to see it get to anywhere close to the 409 or the 368 international number. And so I think ultimately that is going to be a very key element to look at and to pay attention to going forward as far as being able to predict exactly where this film is going to fall. I think 500 million sounds about right. Again, to my charting, it is absolutely within that range. But yeah, basically it's going to be how little money does this make, or if you go on the metric that some people are using, some people are saying the film is a $600 million break-even point. And again, they're using different metrics than I use. Either it's going to be a major financial loss or it's going to be barely making its money back. It's going to be a very interesting number to actually look at. Cocaine Bear, $28.3 million. Jesus Revolution at 15.5. Avatar: Way of Water, I did make this comment on my channel over at OMB Reviews. Boom. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Numbers, for updating this. So if you watch my video, OMB Reviews, I'm going to talk about that as the recording of that video. It was saying 2.9 billion, and you saw it on your screen. There was clearly an error. They have fixed that error. I'm not surprised by that. The numbers is usually a lot better about that than Box Office Mojo. So now I can say, "Patooey, I spit at you, Box Office Mojo. Get off my screen." And so $2.267 billion. So still very impressive numbers there, but not anywhere to 2.9. I bet some people try to run with that number too, because that's what people do. Remember when Box Office Mojo made a mistake, and you have people even like John Campea trying to run with it, saying, "Look at how amazing this Marvel film did." And I was saying to myself, you know that this is mathematically impossible, right? You know that this is a mathematical error and that anyone with like a second grade education could have figured that out. But anyway, I digress. Puss in Boots, $442 million, very impressive. Magic Mike's Last Dance. This is the film from Warner Brothers that's looking like it's going to be a pretty decent flop. So based off the numbers that we have, going to some charting, because we like to do charting, you can find more about this chart over at OMBReviews.com. Cocaine Bears 28 versus Jesus Revolution $15 million with the budgets of $32 and $15 million respectively. The chances of them hitting their break-even points of 80 and 37.5 respectively are probably pretty decent. So we'll probably end up seeing these films in the top 5 probably by when next weekend is over. Ant-Man and the Wasp, though, this is a bit of a different story. So with the $363 million second weekend numbers, I'm projecting the film to make somewhere between $519 and $727. Now, some might say, why is there such a high range here? This is based off of historical standards. So typically, most films will either double what they did in their first 2 weeks or will have drop-offs to the point of only making really a third of what the entirety of their run ended up having for it. And so on the low end, historically, then, I have $519. That being said, films can sometimes so much underperform that you're looking at closer to maybe 80% of its entire box office made in the first 2 weeks compared to the rest of its run, which could make this film come in underneath $500 million. But based off the numbers that we're seeing and based off of what we know about the MCU and just, again, historical standards in general, I would not be surprised to see this film fall somewhere between $5 and $550 million. But here's the thing. At that $519, you're looking at the film at only $11.6 million in profit. And that is with a $500 million break-even point. If you have this number set at $600 million break-even point, again, shout out to Valiant Renegade because I know he has a different system than I do. We disagree on this vehemently, but we still respect each other, and I will still shout him out because either this film, if you go by his standard, is going to be a flop, or if you go by my standard, it's going to make so little money that it might as well be a flop. Because if you're putting an extra $70 million into this film versus all the other Ant-Man films that came previously, that is a terrible return. It's already a terrible return on investment if you spent the same amount of money as you did previously, right? But the fact that you spent more and are making so much less back compared to those other films, oh boy, not a good look at all. MCU, Ant-Man, in general, are all in trouble. Remember, they were trying to make this film the setup for Phase 5, right? They were trying to say Kang the Conqueror is going to be this huge, big bad. Guess what? People aren't going out to see it. You got the MCU stands, but other than that, the normies are pretty much saying, yeah, you know what? I'm checking out on this, or I'm just going to wait for this to come on Disney+. And again, this is something I think that is leading to a much broader, question of how much of this is impacted by the streaming services and how much of this is impacted by people just not wanting to watch it. I would say it probably has more to do with people not wanting to watch it because the quality has just dropped so precipitously. But I think that you can't ignore the fact that there is definitely an impact to be made by the streaming services, but I don't think it's nearly going to be as prominent as some other people might stipulate that it might be. Anyway, Cocaine Bear is at $30 million in the red right now. Jesus Revolution at $13 million. But again, after 1 week, these numbers were actually a lot larger than what had been originally projected from the from the typical studios and the typical studio numbers. So that is definitely good for them. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is in big trouble. Marlowe came out in the second week of release and actually must have done so poorly that they didn't have any numbers as of the recording of the video. And so yeah, Marlowe is still out there. Magic Mike's Last Dance. This is the film from Warner Brothers. $41 million in the red. And this, again, leads to a broader discussion about Warner Brothers. What in the hell are they doing? Because if you look at their films and all the films that they have released, I really honestly can't think of, and again, I don't have my studios listed here in this chart here, so there might be one on screen right now that is actually from Warner Brothers, but it's so hard for me to even remember the last huge success they had. Right, most of the films that they've released, especially some of their bigger films or some of their name brand films, like Magic Mike is not as name brand as a DCU title by any means, but I think that most people still say Magic Mike is going to be a much more known entity than any other films that are below that, right? And so when you take that into account, the fact that this film is set to lose around $41 million, or right now is at $41 million in the red, and is not likely going to make its money back, that is a very, very bad sign. Warner Brothers is in a complete disarray right now. And if you look at all the films they have planned to come out, with Shazam expected to make only $35 million domestically in its opening, let's just say right now Warner Brothers is in a crap ton of trouble, and it's not looking any better for those films. The last two films I'll mention, though, Puss in Boots, again, pretty much done. Still $138 million in net profit. Kudos to them. But for both Puss in Boots and Avatar: Way of Water, both of them did deals with China. So I will say to them, screw you to the studios for doing work with China when you clearly didn't need to, because you would have still made mass profits without doing work with the Communist Party. Anyway, with all that being said, what are y'all's thoughts about these movies? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Do you think Quantumania will get to $500 million? And what do you think is the final number going to be for the movie? And also, how much of the profit, how much profit do you think it's going to make? Do you think it's going to make any profit whatsoever? And also, if you want a fuller breakdown, including other films and other charts comparing Ant-Man to Ant-Man, and then also to talking about the Avatar comparisons, go check out the video over on my channel, OMB Reviews. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Make sure to smash the like button, light of the fire button, Odyssey, smash the rumble button. Wherever you're watching us, join us over on Locals, join us over on any of the memberships, right, to the Geeks and Gamers website, geeksandgamers.com, because it really does help out a lot. Thank you for putting up with my voice today. You're all amazing, beautiful people. A blessed Lent to everybody out there. And as always, God bless.